Trying to stay well-informed these days, it feels like a full-time job, doesn't it? You're juggling articles, research, social media posts, just trying to figure out what's actually important. Well, think of this as your shortcut. We're going to dive into the core ideas from Stella Cottrell's work and build you a practical, ready-to-use toolkit for critical thinking.
And I'm sure you feel it too. It's this constant flood of information coming at us from all sides. And honestly, trying to sift through it all to find what's actually relevant, it can be completely exhausting. It's a huge challenge just to cut through all that noise.
But here's the thing. What if the solution isn't about working harder, but about thinking smarter? That's where critical thinking comes in. And no, it's not about adding more work to your plate. It's a powerful filter. It might feel a little slower at first, sure, but trust me, in the long run, it saves you a ton of time because it helps you zero in on what truly matters.
Okay, so let's start with the blueprint. First things first, what is critical thinking really?
When you boil it all down, it's really about one thing: active engagement. It's the huge difference between just letting information wash over you versus really grabbing onto it, wrestling with it, questioning it, analyzing it, and figuring out how all the different ideas connect.
And look, the payoff for doing this is real. We're talking clearer reasoning, which leads to better decisions, faster problem solving. But for me, the real game changer is that last one, self-awareness. A huge piece of this whole puzzle is getting honest with yourself about your own biases and, the things you don't know.
Right, and let's just bust a huge myth right now. Critical thinking is not about being negative or just poking holes in things for the sake of it. No, it's actually about analyzing how other people build their case. It's about looking at their reasoning, identifying the conclusions they're trying to lead you to, and then carefully evaluating the whole thing. It's a structured process.
Which brings us perfectly to our first tool in the toolkit, the argument spotter. Because before you can analyze anything, you have to be able to spot the basic building block of all reasoning.
Now, when we say argument, we're not talking about a fight or a shouting match. Not at all. In this world, an argument is just an attempt to persuade you of something. And it's always got two main parts: the conclusion, which is the main point they want you to believe, and the reasons, which is the evidence they give you to back it up.
Okay, let's look at a really clear example of this in action. The person who wrote this isn't just listing facts, right? They're actively trying to convince you of something. So take a second. Can you see what the main conclusion is and what reasons they're giving you to believe it?
And here's the breakdown. The main conclusion, the big idea, is that investing in renewable energy is vital. And the reasons, well, those are the 3 whys. It cuts fossil fuel use, fights climate change, and boosts the economy. So, your first job as a critical thinker, just learn to pull those 2 things apart. That's it.
All right, so once you can spot an argument, you're ready for the next tool. And this one is fun. Think of these as your X-ray vision glasses. They're going to help you see the invisible parts of an argument. All the stuff that's implied, but nobody ever says out loud.
So check this out. A super simple, everyday example. On the surface, it sounds totally reasonable, doesn't it? You've got a conclusion and a reason. But there's something hiding in there. Something the speaker is just assuming to be true.
There it is. The hidden assumption is that everyone actually loves being outdoors. The whole argument depends on that being true. But is it? What about people with terrible allergies? Or people who just hate bugs? Or who would much rather be in the AC? See? Spotting these unstated assumptions is absolutely key to figuring out if an argument is really strong or if it just sounds good.
Word choice can do this too. It creates these little hidden arguments. So, the literal dictionary definition of 2 words might be pretty similar, but the feeling, the emotional baggage they carry, totally different. If you call a new plan ambitious, that feels positive. But if you call that same plan reckless, you're arguing against it without ever having to make a real point. It's all about framing.
Okay, so we can find the argument, and we can see its hidden assumptions. Now for the big question. Is the argument any good? That's where our third tool comes in. We're going to call this one the quality inspector, and it's all about checking the strength of the reasoning and the evidence.
Bad arguments, or what we call logical fallacies, usually pop up in a few common ways. Sometimes the starting point, the premise, is just plain wrong. The whole thing is built on a shaky foundation. Other times, the logic itself is just busted. The conclusion doesn't actually follow from the reasons. You also see people misusing evidence or using tricky language instead of solid logic. This is a classic example of flawed logic. It's called a non sequitur, which is just Latin for it does not follow. And you can see why, right? The reason that Professor Jones has written books on history could be totally true, but the conclusion that he'd be an excellent mayor, it just doesn't follow. There's a giant logical leap from A to B.
And of course, quality control means you have to check the evidence. A really important step here is to know what kind of evidence you're even looking at. Is it primary evidence? The raw stuff, diaries, original data, first-hand accounts. Or is it secondary evidence, which is someone else's analysis of that raw stuff, like a textbook or a news report? Just knowing the difference helps you ask much smarter questions.
All right, so now we have our toolkit. We've got the argument spotter, the X-ray vision glasses, and the quality inspector. So, how do we actually use all this stuff? Let's look at the two places this comes up most: when you're reading and when you're writing.
When it comes to reading, you have to think of it as an active process. Seriously, it's like you're having a conversation with whatever you're reading. So when you take notes, don't just summarize. Your notes should show that you're engaged. You're identifying the main argument, you're questioning the evidence, you're looking for those hidden assumptions, and crucially, you're keeping their claims separate from your own thoughts about them.
Now, for your own writing, one of the biggest mistakes people make is just dropping a fact or a quote in there and expecting it to do all the work. It doesn't work that way. This four-step process is your best friend. First, you introduce the evidence, give it some context. Then, you present it clearly. But then, and this is everything, you have to analyze it. You have to explain to your reader what it means and why it matters. And finally, you connect it right back to your main point.
And when you put all of that together, this is pretty much the recipe for strong critical writing. See how that works? The biggest chunk, the foundation of it all, is a clear, strong argument. That's your core. Then you back that up with a solid mix of logical reasoning and good evidence. And the thing that makes it really top-notch, that little piece there where you actually engage with what other people are saying.
I think the most important thing to take away from all of this is that critical thinking is not some innate talent. It is not something you're either born with or you're not. It's a set of skills. Every single tool we've talked about today is a skill that you can learn, that you can practice, and that you can get better at. And that's how you navigate this crazy world of information, make better decisions, and really make your own voice heard.
So I'll leave you with this question. We've gone through the whole toolkit: spotting arguments, using your X-ray vision on assumptions, being a quality inspector. Which one of those tools are you going to use first? Seriously, think about it. The next article you read, the next meeting you're in, just try using one of them. What will you see that you didn't see before?